We are gonna kick this thing off. San Diego, thanks for joining us. All right, welcome everyone. This is the HubSpot Lansing User Group. We have a wonderful presentation for you today. We're excited to get right into it. Without further ado, let's move it right along to the agenda. We're going to introduce ourselves so you know who we are and why we're qualified to talk to you. We've got the presentation about winning workflows. There is time at the end that we have set aside for Q&A. If you do happen to think of something as we're going through the presentation, please feel free to pop it in chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that. And then we've got a couple wrap-up items that we're going to cover in our conclusion. So let me start by introducing myself. I am Angelique Dufine. I am the Lansing HubSpot User Group Leader, or HUG Leader as it's more affectionately known. I am generally the main presenter and host of these presentations. And then I've got with me two members of my team from InVerve Marketing. I will let them introduce themselves. Lee, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Lee Edgington, and I am the Media and Marketing Coordinator here at InVerve. And you're going to be hearing a lot from me today about workflows, and as well from Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina in Zunza. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager here at InVerve, and excited to get into this.
Wonderful. Well, without further ado, let's actually get into the real presentation.
Yes,
Lee,
indeed. Welcome to Winning Workflows, dial-up email drip campaigns for dynamic growth. We hope that you guys are ready to join our team while we demonstrate today a couple of different ways you can accelerate lead nurturing with smart HubSpot workflows. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and reach underneath your seat. There's a gift for everybody. You're all walking home with workflows today. So what is a workflow? Well, it's an automated series of actions that handles tasks and internal processes for you, which is a very dressed up way of saying it's a 24/7 personal assistant that can run around behind the scenes and handle the more redundant tasks like follow-up emails and stuff that you don't necessarily want to spend time doing every day. And workflows in HubSpot are available to you if you're a professional or an enterprise subscription level for Marketing Hub, Sales Hub, Service Hub, or Operations Hub. So if you're using any of these or all of these and you're not using workflows, today is going to be a really valuable opportunity for you to see how you can explore that tool and be using it to scale your business. So why are we using workflows? They're not just automation. They are strategy, they're precision, and they're a path to scale smartly and sustainably, even if you're a small business. They're going to save you time. The average office worker spends 2.5 hours a day on repetitive tasks, which is 12.5 hours a week. And automation is going to recover a huge chunk of that time for you or your team. They're going to improve consistency in your customer communications, but more importantly, they're going to drive revenue. And the proof is really in the numbers. 50% more sales-ready leads, 33% lower cost for leads, 18 times more potential revenue, and you can reduce overhead costs internally by up to 12%. So workflows are definitely something you should, could, and will be using when you're done today.
So who are workflows for? We want to gain new customers, so there's different ways to bring them into the fold, and then once they are customers, move them along to be delighted and an engaged customer who keeps coming back. For the potential customers, you can do things like lead magnets and get them to fill out a form that then moves them through the different stages of the journey. You can nurture these leads that are on a larger ticket sales trajectory, or you can recover abandoned shopping cart sales. These are just a few examples of how you can get potential customers across the finish line to becoming actual customers. But once they do become your customers, then you want to understand how they like the product or service that you've provided. So getting their feedback, getting reviews. You can move them from a single sale to additional sales or subscription model. You can, with workflows, you could also give them added value or loyalty plans that you can promote. And of course, you can ask for referrals. So all of these very valuable ways that workflows can help promote your business and move it forward. And that takes us to the customer journey. What sort of trigger in a workflow, what actually gets the workflow started to move somebody from one stage to the next? So in that awareness stage, like I mentioned, it might be what we call a lead magnet, something like a free checklist, an ebook, a webinar that you're offering. They fill out the form, and now you have that lead. You can move them along with a series of emails or other actions that get them along to the next stage, which is nurturing that lead, where they begin to consider your product and service. They aren't just there for the freebie, but now they're understanding what you do and the value that your product or service offers. And that triggers when maybe they have gotten that first email welcoming them, whatever, when they filled out the form, they probably got an email. But from that, let's say they didn't take any action for a couple of weeks, that would trigger another series of emails and try to get them more engaged. Maybe there's a discount or some promotion that you're offering. Once they get to a point where they've shown real interest, that's the lead conversion stage. And that's that workflow would be triggered if they viewed a pricing page or they clicked on some sort of email that really promoted a sale or something of that sort. Now we're trying to turn that hot lead into a sale. And that workflow really works to do that. At the point they become a customer, that's what I was just mentioning in the last slide. What do you want to do? You want to thank them, but then from there you can get their feedback, get a review, get them to buy more, all sorts of things. So that's how workflows at each stage can move them along to the next stage.
And so there's 4 parts of a workflow that are really critical. Let's break it down and think about what those are. The first is the trigger. So that's what's going to kick off the workflow. That could be the product or property value. That could be a form fill. That could be a list enrollment. And we're going to dig a little bit more into that as we get into the presentation. Segmentation is a really powerful tool there. But trigger is what's going to suck them in. And then the action is what steps are going to happen. Maybe that is they're going to get the drip campaign of emails. So that's outward correspondence. Maybe a task is created internally for someone on your team to know that someone's moving through on maybe a high value lead. Maybe it's to change a property value on the contact record to indicate that they're a warm or a cool lead. So there's a lot of that automation that can happen behind the scenes for data hygiene through actions, not just the emails that we're going to talk about today. The third is conditions, which is where paths might branch. So that's an if this or that consideration. Did they engage with an email? Are they in a specific state or region where a service or property would be applicable to them? Those kinds of things that are going to break down further and let you provide a better communication, messaging, or intentional activity to the potential customer. And the last is delays. So does there need to be a pause between actions, such as several days between an email sequence, or maybe a reminder right before an event? These are kinds of ways that you can employ delays in your workflows. And these are going to be the 4 horsemen, I like to call them, of your workflow. So a couple key considerations before you start building your workflow. Think about the goal. What are you trying to accomplish, and what is the potential customer or the enrollee trying to accomplish? What is it that the customer needs from you at the particular stage of the buyer journey that they're in? And then, is your outcome measurable? You really want to focus on quantifiable metrics that are going to reflect how well the campaign is moving contacts through the funnel. So this could be maybe a lead to a marketing qualified lead conversion rate or an email engagement rate. We've got the Hall of Famers, the open rate, the click-through rate, the conversion rate. Those are all key indicators of how engaging and persuasive your content is for moving leads through the buyer's journey. In HubSpot specifically, you can set a workflow goal conversion rate. And that is while you're building the workflow, and it is a predefined goal point. So like, let's say the customer has filled out a specific form after it's getting a series of email drips. When they reach that goal point, it's telling you how successful your campaign or your workflow is to this point. So it's a great way for HubSpot to natively allow you to gauge your success, to find drop-off points or potential ways that you can optimize. You also want to think about, are you going to need any new assets, objects, or properties in HubSpot? But also, do you have any existing assets, objects, or properties in HubSpot that you could or should be using for your workflow? And can you keep the path simple and intuitive? And that might be a list of just 5 things, but that's a lot to consider. So we like to do a wireframe or a map out of the workflow. Why do we do that? The point is so that we can see the big picture. You want to be able to see all of the steps in a progressive manner. We like to be able to catch our issues early and avoid unnecessary complexity. We like to kiss our workflows or keep it super simple. When you can identify the required properties, the steps, the assets as you're working through it visually before building, it's going to be a cleaner experience for you in that process, but also for the customer or potential customer who's experiencing it. So whatever you're using, it could be a paper, it could be a whiteboard, it could be one of these cool tools like Canva, Figma, Lucid. Make sure that you're thinking through the actions and the behavior in your workflow before you actually start building. And if you don't have any of these fancy tools, a bullet list is going to work just fine. You'll be a-okay. We've done it all kinds of ways. In fact, actually, if you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat your favorite tool to use when you map out a wireframe or a process, we're curious to see what you guys use. So here on the left-hand side, you're going to see some lists in HubSpot. Lists are very easily overlooked, but they're a very powerful tool, especially if you're segmenting contacts. So let's talk about lists and segmentation a little bit. Before you trigger a workflow, if you're using segmentation, you can group contacts based on behavior, their life cycle stage, and their source. And this is going to keep the messaging relevant and aligned to where they are in the buyer's journey. So maybe they downloaded an ebook or they visited a pricing page. That's you can monitor through email clicks, through website visits, or content downloads. The life cycle stage, those are preset in HubSpot and available to you to use based on behaviors. And you can set those up in settings for forms. So they might be a subscriber or a lead or a marketing qualified lead. And that's going to be critical for the timing and the messaging that you're delivering in your workflows. And the last, of course, is the source. So did they come from organic search, a form fill, a referral, or Facebook ads? You can tailor your messaging based on how the lead found you. So someone who comes from paid ads might need more upfront education or trust building from you than a referral that came from a satisfied returning customer. All of this data is really easily accessible in HubSpot, and you can use it to set up lists and use those lists as triggers in your workflows. When you combine all of these different criteria, you're going to get a really highly targeted, behaviorally intelligent workflow that makes sure your drip campaigns and your other processes aren't one size fits all, but they're really dynamic and they're a personalized journey that is going to increase your open rates, your click-throughs, and ultimately your conversions.
So we've been talking a lot about the basics. What are workflows? How are they made up? How do you plan for them, and how do you map them out? So now we wanted to give you examples of actual workflows, different types of workflows. And the first one is, as we mentioned, the first part of the buyer's journey, where you attract and you nurture potential customers. And we've thrown around this term, a drip campaign, and that's basically just saying that you get a series of emails that keep re-emphasizing whatever the goal is. For most people, that is a purchase, but it could also be just getting a lead. So how do you attract it? Like we had mentioned before, certain type of lead magnets, such as ebooks and guides, checklists, cheat sheets, free email course. It could be a webinar, a mini series, template files. We're curious, have you set up any sort of lead magnets and what's worked for you. We've used a lot of these different types of options. It could even be giving folks access to a private community or forum that has a thought leader or an expert who's connecting with that group on a regular basis. So there's lots of valuable ways to pull people in and get them started down the path of a workflow and becoming a lead.
Now, as we dig into these, I do want to mention that you will need Marketing Hub, Professional or Enterprise, for these couple of workflows, or if you wanted to use something similar to these examples.
So this is one example where at first you might not quite understand all the icons, but if you look to the far left, that first top icon is really saying that they've filled out the form. And so in this example, they get an email at this point, probably thanking them and explaining whatever it is that they got, how they can access it. Then the hourglass is just indicating there's a delay. And in this case, we'd wait 2 days. We don't want to inundate people with a lot of emails all at once. We want, hence the word drip, right? We're moving them along in a pace that isn't overwhelming them. So we send another email, and it might be a related blog post and gives them a little more information about whatever it is that you're promoting. Then you wait another few days, let's say 3 days. After that, you might want to send a testimonial email to build up trust. Then you wait another, maybe even longer period of time, 4 or 5 days, and then you send some sort of soft call to action for a free trial or an audit. Based on the clicks, tag as engaged lead or cold lead. You kind of are segmenting. So when you get to the point, you see where there's it looks like to me like a faucet with 2 drips, but I think it's representing up 2 branches, right? So workflows can break out into many branches, and in this case, it's a simple one. So either they've engaged with the content or they haven't. And so on the right-hand side, you see a screenshot from an actual workflow in HubSpot. And at this point, we are moving them into 2 different groups. If they've engaged, they're going to go into the engaged lead nurturing group. And if they have not opened any email or engaged with any email, then they're going to go into the cold leads group. And so that's how you can start focusing on the ones who are more likely to take action, and then send them messaging that will move them further along, versus the ones who haven't engaged. You might continue to do the same sort of thing and try to get them to move at least out of the cold leads. And so companies using drip campaigns see up to 80% higher open rates than ones that do like one-off emails. Adding value and follow-ups improves reply rates by 42%. So these are powerful tools.
All right, so that workflow gave us some great behavioral segmentation there at the bottom of it that Gina just described. Now we can take that behavioral segmentation of those warm leads who have engaged or maybe booked a demo, and we can go ahead and move them further down in the process now that we're considering them in the consideration phase. So these warmed leads, the first step you're going to see actually on the left-hand side is some conditional logic we put in place. This is we're looking at maybe through that drip campaign, they saw an offer already that they were interested in, and they've started a deal, or they've already closed a deal with us. But we don't need to send them subsequent consideration marketing. So we're going to let HubSpot pull them to the side, pull them out. They don't need to be marketed to. They're going to get this new drip campaign that is a more targeted set of emails that's going to focus on pain points, maybe a case study or a competitor comparison guide. Maybe it's a new demo invitation. And then you're going to see there after that drip campaign on the right, based on if they booked, they're going to go ahead and be marked as a sales qualified lead, and maybe they get handed off to your sales team, or they go through a new workflow depending on what your process is for your business. If they don't book, then maybe you've decided they're cold or stalled leads and you don't want to allocate any more resources to them. They can go into a separate bucket. It all depends on what works best for your business, but at this point you've had an opportunity to really touch on them with not a lot of upfront effort, evaluate or qualify the leads and whether or not worth putting more attention behind.
So setting up these two workflows that work in tandem, it's really moving. It's kind of the good and the not so good, and getting this machine really operating well, where the good leads move smoothly over to as a sales handoff. The leads that are cold are not really doing much. You can continue to move them through a different sort of workflow, or eventually, like Lee said, just move them, to the point where you're not engaging with them anymore. At a certain point, you realize it's probably not worth. They're not going to respond. So it helps you put your energy and focus on the leads that are more likely to take action.
And that leads us to the decision phase. So then we want to talk about a little bit about deal acceleration and sales enablement, because automation can save up to 30% of time on administrative tasks. So that's 2.5 hours every day that we said before. So if you've got a sales team and you're using Sales Professional or Enterprise Hub, you really could and should be leveraging workflows to help automate some of these tasks. We've showed a couple of deal triggers. Obviously, that suits what your business is. It could be based on deal stage or maybe the kind of interaction. Again, this is a great source for your life cycle stage segmentation, or also your source segmentation. So here we're going to focus a bit on a stalled deal. So this is, let's say, something that's someone who started a deal, but they haven't had a response in 14 days. You can approach this a couple of ways. You could notify the deal owner, and you could create a re-engagement task to let them know, hey, they haven't been contacted or they haven't responded to you. We need to move it along. You could set up a "Are you still interested?" email and try to bring them back into the fold through automation before re-engaging your sales rep. You could wait and move the deal to stale if you don't want to allocate more resources before further engagement. So again, it fits to what your business is scaling to or what you need. So these kinds of automations are going to keep deals from falling into the void.
So the next type of workflows are related to customer service and retention. So this would require, you would need customer service. You would need the customer service professional or enterprise HubSpot portals. And really the idea here is that you want to not only nurture the lead, but now you want to nurture the customer and make them valuable over the life of, they might not just buy once, but they can provide you leads. They can provide more sales. They could go onto a subscriber, sort of a subscriber service. So how do you do that? Well, first way might be just to send them a workflow asking how did we do? And I'm sure many of you, probably all of us, have gotten these type of emails. And this is a simple way to gauge their experience and see if there are any pain points or what did you do well. It's great feedback, but it also keeps them interested and involved in your product or service. So there are surveys within Service Hub, and you can set them up so that when you are running a workflow, it, depending on how people respond to the survey, that they get different types of subsequent emails or messaging, right? So if they're really loving you and they score a high on that survey, then you're going to have different messaging going to them than if they scored they scored you lowly. And so, in fact, if they gave you a low score, you probably want to have somebody reach out to them in a personalized way to find out what happened, what was so negative about their experience. We want to nip that in the bud. We want to understand. We don't want somebody out online writing poor reviews. So that's something that you can, the valuable information when you get somebody to go through this workflow, you can, like I said, break them up into different groups. But here it's talking about NPS score. So that means Net Promoter Score. Basically, it's ranking the type of answers that they give. So how likely are you to recommend your company to a friend or a colleague? The score ranges from up to 100. It's determined by subtracting the percentage of detractors, customers who give a 0 to 6 score, from the promoters, who are those who score 9 to 10. So there's also another way to look at measuring this, and it's called the CSAT, which stands for Customer Satisfaction Score, and that measures how satisfied a customer is with a specific interaction, product, or service. After completing a transaction or interaction, customers are usually asked, to rate your experience on a scale, typically 1 to 5. This makes CSAT an immediate and transactional measure. Either way, you can use these surveys to engage and move more messaging that's appropriate to that customer.
So what makes a workflow successful? If you're accomplishing your goal. Well, you have to start with a clear goal. We mentioned that. But you need to also understand your customer's perspective and what it is that they want to achieve. You need to keep it simple, but you also need to test and improve. So that's kind of what we're showing here on the side. There is a screen under view and inside of a workflow where you can test, evaluate performance, and see the metrics of enrollment, goal meeting. All of those are available inside of your workflow. So this isn't data you have to go chase around or figure out how to annotate and understand. HubSpot makes it readily available to you. So if you can start with clear, measurable goals that align with your work objective, then you're going to see the lead conversion rate improvement that you're looking for. You're going to see reduced churn or increased upsell opportunities. As long as you can measure those KPIs, you can work to improve the process to achieve them. And we're going to go ahead and say it one last time. Go ahead and kiss your workflows. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate them because they tend to break. They tend to confuse teams, and they tend to frustrate contacts and or clients. So if you stick to core logic and only branch where it's very meaningful and valuable to the customer or the internal experience, you're going to have the best time. And just make sure that you always set up regular performance reviews, because no workflow is ever perfect out of the gate. You can create versions, you can split test, and you can experiment with different delays to find ways to make it better.
And we've found it's super important to do the testing as well, because you may set it up and think it's the best workflow in the world, but until you run it through its paces and have multiple sets of eyes on it, we even walk our clients through it, because they may see something we don't see, and that's really critical. Before you turn these things on and start to rock and roll, you want to make sure that everyone's aligned, that yes, this is exactly how we want it to work. It has the content that we all agreed on in the sequence we want, and it's working perfectly. So just want to emphasize how important that is.
It's never a bad idea to ask for a second set of eyes. If you built it, have somebody else proof it. That's our internal protocol, and we strongly recommend it, especially if you're just getting familiar with workflows. Having somebody to talk through it with is going to be a really valuable experience for you and for anyone who's enrolled. Which feels like a great segue to talk about some of those performance metrics that you're going to want to monitor. So we said you can view all of this data and you can make improvements on it, but what kind of data are you looking for? So email opens and click rates, those are those Hall of Famers. Those are really great for showing how engaging your subject line or your call to action is. Your unsubscribe and your bounce rates, high rates here are going to signal that you've got maybe poor targeting or segmentation, or you've got overly frequent messaging happening. Conversion rates at different steps of your journey or your automation, that's going to tell you how many recipients are completing the intended action and where your big drop-off points are. So you can track this by workflow stage. And those drop-off points, that's the email or the condition where you're finding your users are disengaging. This is the best chance to refine and optimize a workflow at any point. And that applies to specific emails inside of them as well. So workflow ideas, we've thrown a lot at you. We've given you a couple of examples, but we've really just scratched the surface of what workflows can do for you. So we wanted you to see lists of some of the different applications for workflows and automation across the different hubs in HubSpot. So for Marketing Hub, you could be using workflows for lead generation, for nurturing and conversions, for event reminders or birthday promotions. For Sales Hub, this could be deal follow-up, ghosted leads, or close win touch points. For Service Hub, you could be looking at ticket routing, SLA escalations, or CSAT loops, or if you have that promoter score as your preferred measure, then that as well. And for Operations Hub, we can do contact merging, you can do onboarding and property cleanup as well. So there's really wide applications for you to scale, even as a small business inside of HubSpot with workflows. So if nothing else today, we hope that you walk away not only with the workflow under your seat, jumping on the couch like Tom Cruise, but that you understand the workflows aren't just about automation. They're about creating a better experience for you and your team, for potential customers, for existing customers. And it's also about getting more conversions. We always want to help you raise that bottom line, and HubSpot does too. So just know that companies that automate lead management can see 10% or more bump in revenue in 6 to 9 months. So we'll see you next year generating more money. And with that, let's make workflows and processes work for us, not the other way around.